July 7, 1947. 5-year-old Gerald Anderson and his family are 25 miles from Roswell, New Mexico, when they discover the unbelievable.
You state your name, please.
My name is Gerald Anderson.
Give me a summary of what happened in 1947.
My brother, one of the first remarks I heard he made was, that's a goddamn spaceship.
Roswell, the first and most controversial UFO conspiracy of all time. The truth shrouded in the shadows. Until now.
How we rolling?
For the first time ever, the infamous Roswell eyewitnesses will be put to the test.
What were you doing in Roswell, New Mexico in July of 1947?
The most advanced lie detection software ever made will determine the ultimate truth.
We've been able to explain them as hoaxes.
There were 4 bodies, not human.
Can you imagine having undeniable proof of extraterrestrial visitation?
How did he describe the craft?
Disc-shaped.
Moment by moment, a timeline of events will emerge. Will the evidence aliens crash-landed on Earth appear with it?
This is rewriting the history books.
This is going to change us forever.
Six days after an explosion rocks the New Mexico desert sky, Gerald Anderson and his family head to the Capitan Mountains on a rock-collecting adventure. It's a trip that turns into a day of discoveries Gerald claims he could never forget.
And as we came around the bend on the next ridge line, there was a large silver disc-shaped object was embedded in the side of the ridge line. I would estimate its size from an adult perspective to be 35 feet in diameter, quite large.
For over 70 years, the U.S. government and even UFO researchers have thought that Gerald's story is all made up.
The official line is that here's somebody who heard about Roswell and then made up a story and put himself in the middle of it.
My brother, one of the first remarks I heard he made was, that's a goddamn spaceship.
Anderson's testimony is very important because it's specific and very highly detailed. It's an incredible level of recall for someone who's only 5 at the time.
There was debris and wreckage and stuff strewn about the area, but mainly this thing was intact.
What if Gerald Anderson is telling the truth?
If the AI can determine whether or not they actually saw a spaceship, would be the #1 thing that we need to know.
If this is true, this will change everything we know, or we think we know, about our place in the universe.
There was a large silver disc-shaped object.
We have no stake in the outcome of the predictions we make about Roswell. Whenever an event occurs, there are some natural questions that arise. That's where our AI comes in. It helps researchers and independent individuals trying to understand the event figure out what the pieces are, what actually transpired.
I've studied this for a long time, and I've always had some doubts about Gerald Anderson's testimony. But I'm interested to see what the AI says.
My brother, one of the first remarks I heard he made was, that's a goddamn spaceship.
The AI predicts this claim from Gerald Anderson is true. He did see a UFO that had recently crash-landed.
Wow, okay.
It's a goddamn spaceship.
You mean Gerald Anderson is telling the truth?
That's phenomenal. That's fantastic.
That is interesting. I'm actually surprised because I was almost ready to throw the whole account out of Gerald Anderson.
Well, this is now confirmation of a downed UFO, the very thing that the government has always denied.
Confirming a spacecraft crash in Roswell is a huge revelation. So big, one human witness alone cannot reach the burden of proof needed. In this case, there is testimony from a second, unrelated witness, civil engineer Barney Barnett.
Barney Barnett works for the U.S. Soil Conservation. He is out in the desert surveying the ground when he sees something very strange.
After Barnett's death, his close friend, retired Air Force officer Vern Maltese, comes forward with the story Barnett was afraid to publicly tell.
I first met Mr. Barnett. I was with the 333rd Bomb Group, Dalhart, Texas. Mr. Barnett told me that coming back from one of his field trips, he'd run onto a flying saucer that had burst open. He had no qualms about what it was. He said a vehicle from outer space without any question. Disc-shaped and a pretty good size, not small. It was crafty. Looked like it carried quite a few beings. Big.
If Barney was being honest about what he saw in the desert, we would have two testimonies of this craft.
Is Maltese telling the truth? The advanced lie detection software will tell us.
He'd run onto a flying saucer that had burst open, disc-shaped, and a pretty good size, not small.
It's true. The AI predicts. Barnett did tell his friend he saw a UFO.
Oh, wow.
He'd run onto a flying saucer that had burst open.
This is the biggest news in the universe, the biggest story of our lives.
Now that we know that this is a real flying saucer, we can start asking the really important questions.
What kind of capabilities could this crashed flying saucer have had?
We're dealing with a technology that may be hundreds, thousands of years ahead of us. A quantum leap.
This is an alien spacecraft. Clearly it employs a technology that is radically different from our own. A new propulsion system, a new energy source, a radical rethinking of our understanding of the laws of physics.
The answer might be in what Gerald Anderson and other eyewitnesses also claimed to see.
When we got up to it, there were 4 bodies, not human.
Right before Gerald's eyes, the presence of extraterrestrial beings.
In 1947, we have yet to even launch our first satellite. There is no space program. We're still experimenting with rockets. There is absolutely no consideration for anything beyond our own solar system.
The undeniable proof of a UFO crash near Roswell, New Mexico would change that forever. Now, 6 days after rancher Mac Brazel hears the otherworldly explosion in the sky, he takes Army Intelligence Officer Major Jesse Marcel to the crash site he discovered. The Major wants to personally investigate the bizarre debris.
He's examined the debris field. He's discovered this strange material.
In 1978, Jesse Marcel would bring a news crew to the field to share his story.
We proceeded to pick up as much of the debris as we could, loaded in a wagon. We filled that up, took us a good part of the day to do that because there's such small fragments, and we had to do a lot of picking. We found a piece of metal about a 1.5 feet to 2 feet wide and about 2 or 3 feet long.
At this point in time, both Brazel and Major Marcel are completely unaware that a second crash site has been found.
40 miles away, there is maybe the primary crash site, more debris, and actually something considerably more intact.
Crash Site 2 is also the place a universe-changing claim is born. According to young Gerald Anderson, as his family approached the craft, questions of its place of origin are replaced by a far more pressing concern.
When we got up to it, there were 4 bodies in it. Not human.
Were they right next to the vehicle?
Right next to it, right under the edge of it.
What did it look like a little bit more?
These creatures, all of them were only about 4 foot tall, 4.5 feet tall. They had very large heads that were shaped larger on the top. They kind of tapered down.
These are not human bodies. These are something he's never seen before.
A lot of researchers, myself included, have had problems with this testimony.
I'm interested to see what the AI says. Was he telling the truth about the descriptions of these beings?
A lot of us have been waiting almost our whole lives to answer the question about whether or not we are alone in the universe.
All of them were only about 4 foot tall, 4.5 feet tall. They had very large heads that were shaped larger on the top.
The AI predicts Gerald Anderson's claim of seeing extraterrestrial beings is in fact true.
This is getting more interesting. That is pretty big.
This changes everything.
To finally know it's emotional. He is describing beings from another world, aliens that set foot on planet Earth in 1947. I cannot emphasize enough how important this is to find out that he is telling the truth about the beings and the craft that he saw.
Gerald's story about beings lying in the desert is made even more believable because a similar claim is made by co-witness Barney Barnett, a claim not publicly confirmed until after his death.
They were all dead and only a short distance from the craft. Only one thing that he mentioned is the hands were not covered. They had 4 fingers.
Vern is adamant that Barney told him that these are not human bodies.
We also have an adult witness that claims to have seen alien bodies.
But will the AI confirm Barnett saw an alien being?
Only one thing that he mentioned is the hands were not covered. They had 4 fingers.
Maltese's statement is true. The AI predicts Barnett did claim to see an extraterrestrial.
Wow.
2 people saw a crashed craft, stated that they saw aliens, and both of them we know now are telling the truth is extremely important.
Although Gerald Anderson's claim takes it one step further, he says he saw something even more astonishing.
There was 2 of them who were obviously dead. One of them was obviously very badly injured, and one of them apparently suffered no ill effects or didn't appear to be injured, and was ambulatory, was mobile. I was just sitting there. As we approached, creature drew back like this, like it was in fear of us, like we were going to hurt it. It seemed to calm down and just sat there and kind of looked back and forth, watching them, apparently trying to figure out what was going on.
If true, this means one of the aliens survived.
It sounds like a sci-fi movie.
Creature drew back like this, like it was in fear.
I want to see what the AI says. Imagine coming upon a crashed disk. If that was not enough, your mind is racing and thinking about, should I get closer? And as you do, you find something even more extraordinary.
Gerald Anderson reported seeing aliens, but he also noticed one of them moved.
It scared me, and I ran around behind my father and my uncle, and this thing was sitting there on the ground, and it kept looking back and forth, and it just had its hands like it's in its lap, and it just kept looking back and forth.
The AI results will play a huge role because his testimony is one of the biggest keys we have when it comes to descriptions of bodies related to this incident.
Was there a live alien at crash site 2?
One of them was obviously very badly injured, and one of them apparently suffered no ill effects, or didn't appear to be injured, and was ambulatory, was mobile, and was just sitting there.
This statement is ruled a lie. Gerald Anderson is showing signs of deception.
This was always something of an outlier. It didn't really gel with anyone else's testimony.
It makes you wonder why part of the testimony would be true and part false. You know, is it just a simple embellishment of a story to make it sexier?
Some people have legitimate experiences that are so powerful and extraordinary that they seek to be believed so badly that they do add their own detail. I call this legendizing. The original event may have been true. It doesn't mean his whole story is false.
We still have the AI indicating that the part about seeing alien bodies came back as true, and that is significant.
Later that afternoon, Sheriff George Wilcox gets a call from an unknown witness reporting the crash at the location Gerald Anderson's family and Barney Barnett discovered. It's clear to Wilcox this is not the same crash site as the one found by Mac Brazel. But before sounding off the UFO alarm, he wants to find out more.
Sheriff Wilcox needs eyes on the ground, so he turns to someone that he trusts implicitly.
Sheriff Wilcox has Dan Dwyer, who's a firefighter there in Roswell, go out to the scene to see what's happening.
You don't want to be known as the crazy flying saucer guy. So with all these stories coming in, you need to send someone and find out what's really going on.
But right after Sheriff Wilcox dispatches Dan Dwyer, he actually gets a call from the government.
This is a really important moment in the story because this is when the military finds out there's a second site.
And they tell him to stop looking into it, to call off the investigation. But by this point, it's too late.
In 1995, Dan Dwyer's daughter, Frankie Rowe, goes on record with the story her dad told her about Crash Site 2.
He said it did not come from this world. Did not look like anything he had ever seen. And he said there were little people out there.
moment the word is received at the Roswell Army Airfield, they immediately cordon off the area. They make sure that all roads leading into and out of Roswell are closed off.
Military are absolutely in a race against time. They have to cover this up before the world comes looking, because they will.
They quickly take Dwyer aside and warn him and threaten him to keep his mouth shut.
He was very angry for a long time about that the government could do this, that they could just totally suppress something that actually happened.
I was able to interview Frankie before she passed away. I felt her testimony was genuine. I can't wait to see what the AI indicates about her testimony, because it would vindicate her after all these years.
And he knew that it happened. He had seen them.
The AI predicts Frankie is telling the truth. Her father told her that government officials suppressed the evidence of extraterrestrial beings he personally saw.
This is just shocking to me because, you know, military have no authority over civilians. This is just pure intimidation.
Our first concern is national security. Are we dealing with potential enemy? Are we dealing with a technology that may somehow enslave us? Are we able to replicate the technology? Are we able to duplicate it for our own advantage? The first country to master advanced alien technology would rule the planet.
He told my uncle and my father that if they didn't want to spend the rest of their life in prison, they would never say anything about what they saw there. If they ever wanted to see us kids again, they'd take the kids away. They'd never see the kids, meaning me. That we better keep our mouths shut. If we did not, this is what was going to happen.
Gerald Anderson's account of the military bringing in the strong-arm tactics is very easy for me to believe.
Gerald coming back telling the truth is a gut punch that our military personnel would threaten civilians. What I find even more disturbing is Gerald's only 5 years old, and the military is threatening children?
Everything that's being discovered out in the middle of the desert is being recovered and transported and housed at Roswell Army Airfield. They're not entirely sure what has happened, but everybody's being mobilized.
Beyond containing the sites involved, special flights are coming in from elsewhere, from Washington, from Fort Worth, from Colorado, from White Sands.
You've got military vehicles, you've got military airplanes, you've got military personnel sweeping in to take swift and iron-fisted control of the situation right now, because they know how high the stakes are. And they have a specific mission in mind, and every action that they take is only to get this covered up as quickly as possible.
At the same time, 2 Secret Service agents show up. This is the 509. This is atomic bomb capable aircraft, and yet these agents have a sort of access all areas past.
Roswell experts believe these people are notorious government agents known as the Men in Black, covert operatives responsible for discrediting reports of UFOs. Agents who are now in full control of all containment operations. And their sights are set on the Roswell witnesses. 1947. America is steeped in uncertainty. Fears of a deadly Cold War hang over the nation. For Roswell's 509th Bomb Group, manning the country's nuclear arsenal means they're on constant high alert.
We had enough concern just dealing with Soviet spies back at that time. Everybody and anybody could be accumulating information and providing it to the communists in Russia.
The United States government didn't want this new alien technology falling into the wrong hands, and they didn't want to panic the people.
In July 1947, no airbase in America is more prepared to shut a UFO story down than Roswell. So the debris from both flying saucer crash sites is being brought to the airbase. 44 years later, Robert Smith, a sergeant based at the airfield, testifies about knowing one of the secret Men in Black agents leading the mission.
I mentioned about a distant cousin of mine that was with the Secret Service. And during our conversation, this was back in the 70s, and we talked at length. He was there.
At Roswell?
Yes, he came as more or less a representative of President Truman.
If this testimony is true, it further establishes the level of high-ranking authority involved. In this case, all the way to the very president himself.
A distant cousin of mine. He was there.
At Roswell?
Yes, he came as a representative of President Truman.
The AI predicts Smith's statement is true. They were there, and they were sent by the White House.
Representative of President Truman.
Wow. We have confirmation that President Truman was actively involved in the Roswell incident.
It's clear that at the highest level, Washington has their own people on the ground. They are going to be the ones in charge.
For the arbiters of the cover-up, their mission is to not only find every piece of physical evidence, but also those who know too much.
They have to be silenced at any cost.
Without doubt, rancher Mac Brazel is their #1 target.
"36 hours have passed since Mac Brazel confessed his story to reporter Frank Joyce. Now the rancher is sitting down with Joyce's boss, Walt Whitmore, and radio station co-owner George Roberts. In an interview 44 years later, Roberts recalls the events of that day.
Was W. Whitmore hiding Brazel from the military or from your rivals?
We just had a good story.
So Whitmore was more worried about protecting his story than the military finding where Brazel was.
We had no reason to hide him out, particularly, except we wanted to do some talking to him first.
George Roberts' statement about Mac Brazel is confirmed to be true.
We had no reason to hide him out.
They have one of the biggest stories of all time, and they want the exclusive. demonstrating that this was something truly phenomenal in nature.
Oh, this was a highly unique experience.
They need this scoop because time's running out. The moment the government takes Mac Brazel into custody, that's it, the story's over, Mac is silenced.
The military was looking for him.
I think so, yeah.
They get a complete taped story from him. So there it is, Mac Brazel telling the whole story from start to finish.
That night, as Mac Brazel hides out with the reporters, Major Jesse Marcel begins the long drive from Crash Site 1 to the base. His truck loaded with debris, Marcel decides to stop off at home to show his young son. A night Jesse Marcel Jr. says he will never forget.
I understand he was on his way to the air base to deliver this, but he felt that this was unusual enough that he wanted us to see it first before he delivered it to its proper destination.
Marcel realizes that once he crosses back onto the base, he may never have another opportunity. He wants his son, Jesse Jr., their only child, to see something so extraordinary that it will be a shared experience for the rest of their lives.
Major Jesse Marcel knows the military won't just look at the debris with wide-eyed wonder, but exactly what kind of action will they take, and how far will they go? According to intelligence officer Major Jesse Marcel's son, Jesse Jr., on July 8, 1947, his father returned from Crash Site 1 and showed him the mysterious debris he recovered.
He has to share this secret with them, because maybe he'll never get the chance to do it again.
There were fragments of what appeared to be I-beams, relatively small. The most unusual part of this whole thing was what was on the I-beam. There appeared to be a type of writing on the mainframe itself.
These strange symbols, which were like no language, no lettering that he'd ever seen before, and it's something that stayed with him for the rest of his life.
Is it possible you might have mistaken it for Russian, Japanese, any other language?
No, no way.
Anything like hieroglyphics?
Well, in my first impression was, this is Egyptian hieroglyphics, but I knew enough at that time to know that it wasn't, because hieroglyphics usually have some animal symbols in it also, but there was none.
If he is telling the truth, we are dealing with the most profound event of the millennium.
My first impression was, this is Egyptian hieroglyphics, but I knew enough at that time to know that it wasn't.
The AI predicts Jesse Marcel Jr.'s claims about the strange debris recovered from Crash Site 1 to be truthful.
I never doubted Jesse Jr. I knew him, I met him. I heard this person to person, and I had not the slightest doubt that he was being truthful with me.
Jesse Marcel Jr.'s testimony validates the hieroglyphics and the I-beam, and it's just a big, big part of the story.
The hieroglyphics suggest an alien alphabet of some type.
It is still undeciphered. No one has been able to establish its origin, its nature, and its representation.
July 8, 1947. A military operation to remove all evidence from crash site 2 is underway. Among those present at what appears to be the main crash site is a photographer flown in from DC's Anacostia Naval Air Station. At Roswell, Sergeant Brazel is tasked with the most secretive assignment of his life.
Frederick Benthal is typically sent on crash investigations. He has no idea what his assignment is.
There's this bizarre situation. He's told, take pictures of this, but don't look at the subject. Now, Frederick's testimony only emerged in the 1990s, and we have a written affidavit from him.
You couldn't hardly see anything inside the tent. They said, set your camera up and take a picture 15 feet away. One guy did all the instructions. You see this flashlight? Yes, sir. You're in focus with it? Yes, sir. Well, take a picture of this.
In a written statement, Benthal claims he is ordered inside a dark tent and told exactly where to aim his camera. The subject of his secret assignment is about to be revealed.
There were 4 bodies I could see when the flash went off. I remember they was thin, and it looked like they had too big of a head. I took 30 shots. It smelled funny in there.
We would love to have any photographic evidence that would demonstrate beyond any doubt Roswell represents the first encounter with aliens from another planet.
Sergeant Benthal is never able to provide photographic proof, and his written testimony can't be verified by any lie detection software. However, his affidavit does describe an alien similar to the figure the other eyewitnesses claimed to see.
When you add Benthal's statement to that of Barnett and also to Gerald Anderson, you start to have a really strong case that there were extraterrestrial bodies part of this Roswell event, and the government then proceeded to cover it up.
By 9 a.m. on July 8, it's 36 hours since Major Jesse Marcel was last on base. Now, with the second site found and Secret Service agents on the scene, Marcel's boss, Colonel Blanchard, is eager to find out what he's discovered at Crash Site 1.
Marcel is clear in his mind. This is something probably extraterrestrial. He says, sir, there really is something odd here. This I-beam is covered with bizarre symbols. Walter Haut is the much loved and trusted, friendly public information officer.
He answers directly to Colonel Blanchard.
In 1990, Walter Haut testifies about the first official press release regarding the Roswell incident.
And what did Colonel Blanchard want you to do?
He told me to prepare a release with basically the information that he gave me.
The AI predicts that Haut is telling the truth. The press release he submitted was based on the existence of unidentifiable debris.
Right, it came from the top. This test proves that the orders came directly from the base commander, Colonel Blanchard.
Colonel Blanchard told me he had in his possession a flying saucer, parts thereof. Gave me a little bit of idea where it came from, and ranch northwest of Roswell.
It's extraordinary. Haut is being asked to put out a story that basically says, we have recovered a flying disc.
Despite the Secret Service taking charge of the recovery missions, Colonel William Blanchard seizes the opportunity to stamp his name on this event.
He's competent, hugely ambitious, and he's seeing the opportunity is to write his name into history and to climb up the ranks to the very senior levels at the Pentagon.
Is Haught's version of events the truth?
When it was done, to take it into community and deliver it, hand deliver it to the 4 news media we had in Roswell at that time, which is what I did.
The AI predicts it is. He was authorized to distribute news of a flying disc by Base Commander Colonel Blanchard.
It's really amazing that we have confirmation that we have a high-ranking senior officer in the military sending information to a press officer to release information on a UFO in the news.
He may be the commanding officer, but there are people back at headquarters and people in Washington, D.C., who are taking a very different view. This could be a disaster, as bad as it gets. The one thing that the United States government probably wants here, from the top down, is containment. And what is this local unit going to do? They're going to tell the world.
Within minutes of Walter Haut leaving the colonel's office with the now infamous flying disc press release, the scene on the airbase takes a dramatic turn.
Blanchard sees 2 Secret Service agents coming his way. They want to stop the story going out.
But it's too late.
The secret of Roswell is out, and the story is about to explode all around the world.